Welcome to Collab Not Multiplayer. I'm Honeyshuckleex.
I'm Zachbot Barbecue.
And I'm Honeyshuckleex.
Today we're going to be talking about genres in video games and in media.
But mostly about video games.
Yeah, that is our wheelhouse.
That is our wheelhouse.
It occurs to me I don't actually know what that means.
A wheelhouse or a genre?
I was thinking wheelhouse, but you genre.
Yeah,
Isn't like a wheelhouse, well, it's either the housing for the wheel or it's where you keep your car.
I'm not gonna get into it. That's a word nerd. Ask a word nerd. I'm not that kind of word nerd.
Okay, cool. Anyway, genres, on the other hand, are these little things, these little words that we use to describe media, so that way we can tell if we might like it.
Well, yeah. I mean, it doesn't just apply to media, it applies to everything. But it is often used to categorize creations. So, there we go. There are creation categorizations for the purpose of taste defining, I guess? I don't know.
Yeah, like, in, like, music, some people might consider, like, an instrument used in a song as part of what makes it a genre, or its tempo.
Well, that starts with classical, where, piano pieces were their own genre.
So yeah, the term genre can be used to apply to a lot of different...
It can apply to all media, and it's inherently messy, and that's kind of why the conversation's playing out the way it is.
Trying to define a genre is to be exclusionary.
The more complex the media, the more exclusions there are.
Yeah, like, I tried to summarize this last night. We were talking about this and this complex topic, and I considered, if you think of a movie, you typically have two kinds of genres. You have your setting genre, like fantasy, sci-fi, sitcom-ish.
Action, thriller.
Yeah. Hold on. We're already, you're starting to mess up my graph, because we have, like, a setting, and then we have the tone. Because I fucked up already with saying sitcom, because that's also the tone. Because...
Right.
And while it can also be a setting, it is more commonly a tone. And then, like, horror is a tone. Action can be more of a tone.
Right, right.
So, like, you kind of end up making a chart asterisk of, like, your settings and your tones. But then, like, if we think about video games and, like, how we apply genre to video games, they still have the setting and tone, but then they have camera perspective, they have gameplay elements, they have how many players.
And how those players interact.
It's not just like, do you have a fantasy sitcom? It's like, does your fantasy sitcom have a first-person view?
Does it have combat? What kind of combat?
Is there jumping?
Yes. It's like, oh goodness. It just, every time you think about it a little bit more closely, there's another division. And rather than look like a flat graph, it ends up being like a tree. Like the genre tree. The thing is it twists and turns illogically into itself, because things that would seem like they'd be on opposite ends of the tree in a video game can just be right back into each other again.
Yeah, trying to create a graph of this would require fourth or fifth dimensional looping.
At least.
You get too deep into genre details, you're creating a big fucking game division that also doesn't necessarily separate anything.
Well, and it doesn't serve any purpose at some point. And that's just the thing, is like, they become so... Almost every project feels like it's trying to genre bend, and then if everything's genre bending, then the genres lose all meaning.
So yeah, long story short, what could be a conclusion of another discussion is, yeah, genres, at least in terms of video games, are pretty fucking semantic.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's some basic ones where you go, like, 3D. The game is 3D. We've got one. We've got one that seems simple.
It seems simple.
And then there's Doom.
And then there's Doom, which plays 3D, but it's actually 2D due to limitations of the hardware at the time.
It's built like it's, internally it runs like it's a top-down game, but it's, like rendered in 3D and has a lot of mechanics that give it that third dimension, so it's entirely up to interpretation.
And there's lots of games that are like that. the one I'm playing right now, Chicory, is like that, where everything's 2D, but you navigate the space three-dimensionally, and there's so many games that do that, unlike side-scrollers, old-fashioned side-scrollers, where it literally is 2D. There's an up and down on it, but there's no back and forth, really. Or so little that it doesn't count, question mark? But yeah, it all gets confusing, because it's like, very few games are actually 2D. So what makes it a distinctive 3D? Is it the fact that you can turn your head?
Like, is it moving on more than two axes? Like up and down, side to side? Is that 2D? Or if it uses 3D models, is it 3D?
Yeah, exactly. It just... You can stretch them any way you want, but if there's no consensus, then, yeah, it loses all meaning. And it's like that for every single one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, you don't want to think too hard. And, yeah, listeners, feel free to comment your own takes on... on the weirdness that we bring up, or bring up your own weirdness. This is a conversation builder. It's like, we're not going to come to a consensus or a definitive anything. That's kind of the point.
Yeah, like, here's another one. So, like, shooters is a genre, and first-person shooter is, like, the most common version of that genre, right? What do you think that entails?
So, you have a gun that, like, shoots lasers or bullets or something, and you're typically expected to use that to make other things, or people, like human players, die.
Well, here's the thing, though. If you were to play Skyrim as an archer, wouldn't that be a first-person shooter?
Kinda, but that's not really, like... The game's not about being a first-person shooter, even if it has first-person shooting in it.
Yeah, but sometimes games are classified by their side aspects as well as their main aspect, because mini-games also exist.
Yeah, but I don't want to ever put a game into a genre because of a mini-game it contains. Doesn't one of the Witcher games become a deck builder at some point if you do that?
True. But can we ignore the fact that Mutazone has a gardening aspect?
In my opinion, yes. Absolutely, yes. I think that was a very underutilized mechanic in the game. It's utterly forgettable. The only reason I remember it at all is because they made it a standalone side game that you could also play. So I don't think that's a great example, but I get your point. I'm just, exaggerating for effect here, and to crack you up, because I enjoy that.
Yeah, it's like, would you say... Like, just general thing, because I'm the only one that's going to have experience with this. Would you pitch the Sonic Adventure games as pet simulators?
I have no idea. Please tell me.
Because like the Chow Garden is a thing.
Yeah, and...
Here's the thing, though. I have heard many people playing that game for hundreds of hours because of the pet sim.
It's like, if you're not into grinding for, high scores in the main action gameplay, it's like, yeah, the Chow Garden runs very deep. With my limited time with it, I have barely scratched the surface.
Oh, jeez.
So your question then is, like, with that whole, like, side aspect thing, is Sonic Adventure 2 a pet sim game?
And it's like, well, yeah, it's not just that, obviously, but...
Obviously.
It can be a strong enough part of it that... Yeah, in that case, there is actually some reason to just slap that label on it. I mean, Sega does, apparently.
Oh, wow.
I'm only interested in giving another Chow Garden if there's a Sonic Adventure 3.
Why not market the standalone game people actually want to play? I don't understand.
Yep, you understand. You get it.
Okay.
So people want another Chow Garden as a standalone thing without having to do the Sonic gameplay?
It's like, if nothing else, you could put that in, like, Sonic Frontiers could have had a Chow Garden, and it might have actually fit that game better.
From what I know of Sonic Frontiers, that sounds about right.
I know nothing.
Because it also has a fishing minigame, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Add that to the list.
Again. We haven't updated that list in a while. In fact, I don't think I've played a game with fishing in it, where the character fishes, since we recorded that episode.
Wow, aren't you? No, that's not true. You played Final Prophet. Final Prophet has fishing in it.
What?
You scan the fish, but it is technically fishing.
I forgot about fishing. Final Prophet. Oh. Oh, yeah, we're definitely gonna have to give you guys an entire episode about that game. Oh, my lord. Oh, yeah, we'll put a link in the description. Just, if you've never heard of it. Yeah, talk about defining genre. What genre would you put Final Prophet RPG, a shop RPG
so,
in?
Final Prophet is definitely a top-down, and aesthetically it's the pixel art style, but it's also definitely like a merchant sim, because that is a thing. It's not like a huge genre. I like it, but it's not exactly
And you mean
prevalent.
the genre, not the game. You enthusiastically like the game.
Yeah.
You mildly like the genre.
The genre, yeah.
Yeah.
I love the game. But, like, it's also got, like, some choices matter elements to it. It's also very micromanagey. It's also, like, a collectible game. Because, the collectathon elements, you do need to proceed.
Oh, no,
Like,
I'm not arguing with you. I'm thinking about where those pieces fit and whether or not I would consider that elements of a genre, and it's like, that's where we, it's like, do you need to include all of the elements in the genre label of a game? And I would be like, well, what's the purpose of the genre? Is the genre to attract players? And I think that really is what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to match up an audience to a piece of media without having to consume the media to know, right? And it's it gets so confusing because everybody has such varied taste and experience. So,
but it's also definitely an exploration game.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah.
Like, it has no combat in it. So it's not like, no combat. I didn't say there's no murder.
And I'm not gonna say nothing till later. But anyway, so Final Prophet's got a lot of stuff going on, and it's very hard to categorize because it's also a very unique thing. And that's the thing about video games. It's like each one can be so different from like almost every other one while having so much in common with all of them if you don't play it all. And you're looking at the game, so this one's just like that one. You move a little guy and he uses a weapon of some sort, right? Like, well, yeah, that's a lot of them, sure. But the experience playing them is very, very different.
Like, yeah, if you tried to say that the original Legend of Zelda was like Hades, because both of them are top-down, hard, and you wield a weapon against enemies, sure, but you're missing incredible amounts of nuance here. You also have puzzles in Hades, and in The Legend of Zelda, it's well renowned for being the first game to have, like, a save system, so you don't, like, lose your progress when you die.
Oh, coming out of the arcade era.
Uh-huh.
Fascinating.
That was one of the selling points. You buy the console so you could save your progress.
Technology!
Wow.
Revolutionary.
And now they're taking it away more and more.
Because not having a save system is novel now.
Everything repeats. It all comes around again. But yeah, genres can lead you into they can mislead you away from things you might enjoy, and they can lead you into little stupid holes that you wish you never found in the first place.
Like, there are some games that I'm thinking that I have not mentioned, and I'm like, I can't open that box right now. We already have plans to talk about this.
Teasers are a thing, kid.
We have a Hex episode in the works. It's too big to tackle in this episode.
Oh, yeah, if we're going to be talking about... Yeah.
We can't talk about that.
No, we absolutely can't. But if you've played the Hex, you have an idea of why that might be in the back of our brains in a genre episode.
If not, all I will say is, I encourage you to be curious about the Hex.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, if it's ever been on your, I don't know, list, but maybe, go ahead. Especially if it's on sale and you got some time to kill, that is a great way to spend a little time.
And if you've ever bought, like, a charity bundle on itch, there's a good chance you have it. Just go play it.
Oh, that too. So, Alright, so we've gotten into the weirdness of genres as they relate to things that people who don't play games might understand if you try to talk to them about it. Now let's get into the things that even gamers are confused about with each other. The genres that are based on specific games. Specifically, the ones that confuse me the most. And Shuckle has tried to explain this to me like a million times, and it doesn't help. I just get more confused every time.
Okay, so I'm gonna...
Hang on, I'm gonna mention it's like the roguelikes and the Metroidvanias. And it's like, what?
Okay, so I'm gonna do the more simple one first. The one that people are slightly more sure about what it entails, and that's the Metroidvania. So imagine, if you will, you have a big world of some kind. And you can explore a lot of this world, but there are some obstacles in your way, and you need to find something in the world that will let you get past this obstacle. It could be like a bomb to blow up a wall. It could
So the original Zelda is a Metroidvania.
By a certain degree, you could call it that because of how open it is. Most Zelda games, I don't think, quite fall into this because they're pretty linear. But yeah, the first one, I could see an argument for that.
Okay, well, I'm definitely thinking that Chicory's one, but I know you haven't played that yet. But there definitely, you have to find things to open up the map.
And so clearly what people are thinking of is Metroid, hence the Metroid part, and Vania because of later Castlevania games. So some people might argue that you have to have like 2D platformy kind of thing because those games do have a pretty like strict 2D side-scrolly platforming-ish.
Right.
But I would say no, you don't need that. Don't necessarily think camera perspective determines if something is like a genre from like this game design perspective.
And yeah, I feel like, you know, the biggest shift in the series I hear about Metroid Prime is largely the fact that it is set in first person.
Oh, so it's no longer a Metroidvania.
Some people might argue that. I would say, like, I haven't actually played the game, so I don't know. If it made a linear jump, then I would say that it would not be.
So
but
it's mostly responding to the capacity for the game setting and space to be used in multiple different ways. And you're not determining a strict linear path for the player to take in order to proceed through the game.
Yeah, like when I played Hollow Knight, I did almost everything you could do in the game without unlocking the spell Desolate Dive. And when someone was trying to give me advice, they went, "What the fuck? How haven't you gotten that yet?" This is the most complete map I've ever seen without that power-up. How did you get over there?
Leave it to Shuckle.
Uh-huh. So I think, like, the spirit of the genre is exploration, rewarding you with more exploration.
Okay, cool. I mean, that one sticks a little bit better than the next one. And the fact that you sigh is reassuring to me.
Okay, so...
And I know you've done this so many times.
Okay, let's set the scene with one of the things that most people agree is a commonality shared in all roguelikes.
So, yeah, we've shifted from Metroidvanias to
roguelikes.
Roguelikes.
Okay, thing number one. If you die, you have to start all the way over from the beginning.
You obviously can take something with you, right?
That's a roguelite.
Oh, okay. All right.
In a roguelike, I honestly don't think that there should be a division between these two things, especially sounding so similar to one another. In a roguelike, if you die, you start over from the beginning, nothing carries over.
Like an arcade game.
Like an arcade game. Another thing that draws people to it is the procedural generated elements. Your run will never be the same. You cannot fully prepare for what you are going to face with 100% certainty. Playing the game enough, you may go like, oh, RNG, it's probably going to be this, but you don't know for sure. You can't fully prepare for what you're going to face.
Okay. Can you give me some examples of these?
Games that you've played?
No, just games I might have heard of.
Let's
not be silly.
Slay the Spire, I think, falls into roguelike, although a lot of people say that because you technically unlock things, it's a roguelite, and I say, no, they're doing that so that way it's easier for you to actually learn how to play the game. That's different.
Okay.
Is it?
Yes!
Exactly.
Okay.
Anyway, continue.
Okay, so... Slay the Spire, clearly the original rogue is like this. Most people don't make true rogue-likes because
it's too tight.
It's so tight, yeah. It doesn't have as much appeal.
Well, yeah, that just the idea that you're describing doesn't sound super fun to me. It's like, having a layout that's random and I have to start over every time. How do I ever get better? It's like the thing about a normal arcade game is you play it over and over again because you're finally learning the layout, you're learning what to do. But if it's always random on top of that, I'm like, ooh, that is an appeal for somebody else. That doesn't hit a button that's enjoyable for me, but I'm not everybody. You know what I mean? I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying it's not for me.
Yeah, I will say, I'm going to use Slay the Spire as an example here. Basically, you're given this map. It shows you everything in the first zone. So you can see, I can fight a monster here, or I can go to a shop here, or I can rest here. And you basically plot your course through the map getting to the boss. And if you're going to get into fights, you'll know, it could be, 3 of this enemy. It could be 1 tough enemy. You won't know until you actually enter, but you're mentally preparing, I've made it this far through the zone. This thing's gonna start showing up.
Yeah, not to mention, Slay the Spire does specifically indicate which boss you'll reach at the end of each of its zones.
So you have to use your time in this zone to prepare specifically to defeat the next boss. While also thinking long-term, as you start to get better at the game, thinking okay, if this boss shows up in zone 2, I really want this to counteract that. And so it's a very strategic game. You have to balance your resources accordingly.
Okay, alright.
What do you do for your poison build when you have room for something that's resistant to status effects that's gonna come up?
Yeah, because, some of them can just clear statuses. What do you do against an enemy that clears status? Do you just hit it harder? Do you, stall?
Anyway.
Yeah. So that's phrasing a roguelike in a way that I think you might understand its appeal. Because, as you start to learn the game, you start to learn specific recurring patterns in the RNG.
Yeah, and because it's card-based rather than motor skill, reaction timing based, combinations and those kind of things and combat stuff learning curve for me is huge. It's I can learn them, but usually I never feel like that effort is well spent. I would rather be playing something else that doesn't ask me to do that, But when you're doing card strategy, that would definitely appeal to me more than the other games I'm thinking of that would fit in that as a battle category. When you're thinking of a dungeon that's randomly generated, and now I'm all of a sudden facing, I might learn the types of enemies over time, but I don't think I'm going to enjoy myself in here.
And that moves us into the division from roguelike into roguelite, which as a definition I don't really necessarily think we need, but here we are. Roguelites specifically have meta progression. That means there is stuff that carries over from one run to the next, and you can spend points accordingly. In Hades, you get darkness, which you can use to get yourself extra skills, or you can find Titan blood to upgrade your weapons, so that way they're stronger. Things like that. You can unlock new gods to give you different boons, whatever. Basically, if you go through a run, you get to make yourself stronger so the next run is easier.
Right.
And of course, most of them, it's optional, so you can run at the base difficulty forever if you want to.
But you're skilled enough.
Yeah, but there is the option to keep improving and get options to manipulate RNG.
So in the Rogue Lite, it's still procedurally generated.
It's still procedurally generated, and if you die, you still have to start over. The challenge is the fun of the game. It throws at you this really challenging scenario, and you have to make your way through it.
There we go.
Now, there's a lot of caveats here, because some people think, a roguelike is an action platformer, or just action game in general, but I already used Slay the Spire, which is a strategy game. And then there's lots of roguelikes that are turn-based. There are ones that are not. And, jeez.
I've heard the term roguelike used to just describe an RPG with procedural dungeons.
Mystery Dungeon. The Mystery Dungeon series, you could theoretically call it a roguelike, but you level up and stuff, and, there's so many different dungeons for you to traverse through. Does it count as a roguelike at that point? And I want to say no.
It's I'm not sure the original game that the term roguelike is derived from actually had that permanent death mechanic. Nobody mentions that when they bring it up.
So anyway, this is why we wanted to talk about this. It's like, people use these terms, but the closer you look at them, the less they are actually defined, the less they hold themselves to a definition. And, it's like, how useful are they? And it's a matter of taste. It's almost swimming in a sea of gibberish that you hope you find a common language in.
Like, there are farming roguelikes where you have to gain enough money to keep your farm afloat, and if you don't, your land gets claimed. And then there's another one called Luck Be a Landlord, which is a slot machine roguelike, and you just keep pulling the wheel, and like if you gamble enough money, you get to pay rent. And then there's Balatro, which is a gambling roguelike asterisk. It's poker, but you break the rules constantly.
So it's like, yeah, at some point it's not even like procedural generation, it's just about randomness.
It's just random, and you have to try to rig the random to win. And like, I see almost everybody agree that this is a roguelike, but like what it doesn't feel like it compared to everything else that gets called a roguelike. Again, like Hades and Balatro are the same genre. Why?
This is just a great space, though, to really acknowledge how much human creativity is expressed through video games. It's like talking about all of these very different environments that you can put your brain into because you paid a little money on a box, And it's like, and sometimes a lot, depending. They're so varied and nuanced in the ways that you experience them and the ways that you get immersed in them. And we haven't even gotten into the different kinds of storytelling. You know what I mean? And most of that doesn't even make it into the genre discussions. It ends up being like story light or story rich, but that ends up being part of it, not really the genre. It's a descriptor, and that line between what's a genre and what's a descriptor is vaguer the closer you look at it too.
Yeah, it's like, I've seen a couple videos, like a few of them, about like people just kind of giving an overview of like stuff you go through and learn as a solo developer, and everybody talks about like how it teaches you like character writing and stuff. It's like, it can.
Yeah, it can.
Don't you just think the world building in the original Tetris was...
Right. It's like, not every game has characters.
Yeah.
Not every game has a story.
And some games' story is procedurally generated. Like, it gives you these elements. It's like, oh yes, this character is totally falling in love with this character. Like, would I say that Dwarf Fortress has a defined story? No. Do stories happen in it? Absolutely.
It's like, yeah, sometimes the story is not even in the game itself. It is something that the player creates naturally by playing the game. I mean, really, that's true in any video game, but...
In simulation games, especially, you get attached to the little creatures in your ant farm, and you watch as they do really dumb stuff.
Or your animals in Stardew Valley,
I don't think quite to that same extent.
Sure.
But, I mean, there was like that time in The Sims where
What did your Sims do?
Just, yeah, that time I had my, my evil scientist cheat on her elderly girlfriend with a clown.
A clown? Okay, this girl's taste has range.
But in the meantime, there's story stuff happening in the background in The Sims all the time that's procedurally generated. I mean, you don't control them all.
Yeah, you don't, yeah. And in some games, you don't control the things at all.
Right. You just get to choose when you experience them.
And so, like, would you say that is story rich? And I would say no, because that's not, like, the written story of the game.
Sure. I mean, I hadn't even thought about it like that. But at the same time, that's just why there are no definitives in this kind of discussion. Everyone's going to have their own feelings. Everyone's going to have their own opinion. And, they're all just as valid to the person that has them. Because it's based on taste. It's based on personal perception of very complicated things. And let's face it, video game mechanics are so much more complicated than interfacing with like a book or TV. It's like, it expects more of you in ways that are really hard to describe to people who don't play.
God, can I go back to the roguelike point for just a second?
Of course.
Like, okay, like, if it's like a matter of taste, right? And there's another thing about, like, would you pitch this game to someone under these pretenses? Like Sackbot, right? You were talking about with Sonic and the Chow Garden. And, like, tying this together with a roguelike thing, technically speaking, Don't Starve is a procedurally generated permadeath game, which would qualify it as a roguelike. However, if you pitched it to somebody as anything other than a very hard survival game, they would probably hate it. Even if it falls under the category of roguelike under a technicality, don't market it as such. Right.
I mean, Minecraft's permadeath mode could technically, put it into roguelike territory, but that's, definitely, it's not what the game's known for. It's not, hardcore mode is not its primary feature, even if it does have a lot of fans.
A lot of survival games could be called a roguelike, and you should not do that.
Which is, that's the perils of genres and strictly defining them, because there is always that vibe component.
Yeah,
what kind of experience are you looking for in this genre label? That's the part that actually needs to be consistent, but it's amorphous. Once you start putting labels on it, once you start describing it and defining it, it doesn't match other people's anymore. It just kind of has to be, the vibe you get when playing this game and the vibe you get when you play this game. That's ching!
Yeah, and not to say that there aren't survival roguelikes. There definitely are. It's just most of the time when you try to say it as such, you're gonna get the wrong crowd.
Right. And that's an important purpose of using genres at all anyway. So you really want to be careful about that. But when you look at Steam, where the genres and the labels that are put on games are done so by players and not by the people who made it in order to promote it, it becomes soup really quickly.
Just like the psychological horror tag.
Oh yeah. Just since traumas are so personal, psychological horror could be anything.
Uh-huh.
Is Pizza Tower a psychological horror game?
Watching you play it, yeah, I'd say that it might be.
And it gets to the point where people don't believe the tag and start playing things like Doki Doki Literature Club. And you go, oh no, that one's real. That one's real.
It's okay, pro tip, go ahead and look at the genre tags. Sure, but then go down and read the reviews. And if you're looking for something specific and it's not like that, someone will have given it a bad review saying that tag is inaccurate, they don't like it, they came here because of that. And if you're there for something and you're not sure if it's there, check the reviews, because somebody probably left a review. And in all honesty, if you find that something's terribly mislabeled and you were misled, please do leave that negative review and let other people know. It doesn't mean that it's a bad game. It means that it's not for you and you were lured here. If it lures other people like you, you can save them the trouble.
It's it's probably more potent than a negative review. Honestly, if you still like the game, just make sure to mention that you showed up under false pretenses, even if you did love it.
Oh, that too, yeah.
Yeah, one of my most popular reviews is saying this is the best scam I've ever played. And I left a positive review because, one, I did actually enjoy my time with this clearly scam game, and two, developers can try to get negative reviews removed. So if you post a positive review with your genuine concerns, sometimes, it can still work.
The sad thing is, though, is that games, if they have too many reviews, sometimes you can't find relevant ones unless they're negative.
Yeah.
That's the problem, is I really do value the negative reviews more than I value the positive ones, because some people just like everything. They just do. I'm like, okay, I don't want to yuck your yum, buddy, but you? I'm gonna ew all by myself over here.
So that's how reviews can be a tool to see if game's genre is the kind of genre you were looking for. Because no game is going to be for literally everyone.
And thank goodness.
When they try, they fail utterly.
Well, and then there's Tears of the Kingdom, But then again, that also fails some people because it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming to have that much going on in a single game. And, there's a reason that I don't think it's almost anybody's favorite game. It was a novelty toy.
Yeah, and if you play Zelda games for the dungeon crawl, no.
Which I don't, so I liked it a lot. But anyway, yeah, genres are messy. They're questionably useful, mostly based on vibes and baloney.
The vibe on your baloney better be good or it's going in the trash. You're gonna get food poisoning.
Food poisoning.
No. As somebody who had food poisoning recently, no.
So, I think that's the end of this silly discussion. Thank you for joining us. Please do leave comments about the weirdness of genre or about how you think we're full of baloney.
Yeah, tell me why I'm wrong about roguelikes. Because, yes, there's definitely something in there that you're going to disagree with.
Because it ends up being personal. That's just the way it is. And yeah, thank you for your time. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. This has been Collab Not Multiplayer. And I'm Giggleklutz.
I'm Honeyshuckleex.
And I'm Sackbot Barbecue.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.